Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Amy Crane, Social Lab Marketing. So excited to have you guys here with me today. So you know the drill. We've got 30 minutes and we're answering all of your questions about Facebook advertising and online marketing. Except this week, I have a very special guest. I'm so excited to have her with us today. She's going to talk all about content marketing. So I brought Seldon on. She's going to talk about content marketing and how to write the best content for your blog, your website, emails, all of that good stuff. Because I know as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, sometimes when it comes down to writing the content, it can be hard to come up with ideas, to clearly communicate what you want to get out into the world, and how do you know what's working, what people are responding to, all of that good stuff. So she's going to help us clear up some of those questions today. So if you guys have questions as we go, be sure to drop them in the chat box. I'll keep an eye on it so she can answer your questions at the end. And I know I've got a lot of questions for her. So let's go ahead, get started since we've only got 30 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Corey so she can introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Amy. Like she said, my name's Corianne, and I'm super excited to be here. Content marketing is something that I fell into because I had so many good friends who were doing incredible projects. And while they were great in person, and they were great on the phone, and they were even great in webinars, the writing of their material was so difficult for them. And I was like, dude, I can do that. And from there, it just became this natural relationship where I took their ideas and their passion and I put it into words. And that kept them front of mind for a lot of their audience, and then their businesses started growing. And so then I started learning more, they started learning more, and it was this amazingly, co-relationship where we got to just develop together. And it was really fun because it was ultimately bringing their ideas and their message to a greater audience, which was what they wanted to do in the first place, but they were getting stuck exactly like you said, Amy, in that, how do I do it? My ideas are too big. What if this isn't good enough? What if they unsubscribe? Oh God, they unsubscribed. And it took somebody else to come in and like calm them down, say, hey, you got good stuff. Let's make sure that people get it. And from there, it was just a moving process. So I'm super excited to dive in, answer any questions that I can, and talk about how we can keep this going.
Awesome. So I know one of the questions that I have, and I think that this is something I know I struggle with, and I feel like I hear a lot of business owners struggle with, how do you create good content? Because I'll sit down and I will sit there and I'm like, is this good enough to send out? Like, are people actually going to read this? Are they interested in this? Like, is anyone even paying attention? So how do you know that what you're writing is going to connect with your audience and that you are putting out something that people are interested in, that they'll value?
Totally. Oh my gosh. I mean, I hear that. That touches my heart so much because that is such a deep fear, and it's deeper than content, right? That is getting in that self-esteem, that feeling of, can I share my ideas with the world? I'm at a party, and do I want to share my opinion, and how do I engage people? It's that same almost primal energy that we have. But now we're doing it in this virtual space, which can feel really nebulous and can feel really scary. But what's amazing is that people are doing it all the time, right? There's a lot of really, really, really good stuff, and there's a lot of really crappy stuff. And so most likely you're not gonna fall at this edge, and not yet, you may not fall at this edge, right? You're aiming for here, but you're not gonna be here. You're not gonna create the worst stuff on the planet. You're not, right? So let that go, 100% let that go. And when you think of your content, I love when I'm able to create something with a client and I just adore it and they also adore it. One of the biggest compliments I get is if a client says like, wow, that brought me to tears, because it's so clearly communicated what they're trying to go for. And so when you're thinking about it for yourself, the two questions that I always ask myself about the content is, would I want to read this, right? Would this be something that I would actually read all the way to the bottom? And if it's not, take out whatever's getting in the way and fill it with stuff that you actually would want to read. And then the second is, do you love it? Like, if this was a letter that you were going to write to somebody, would you want to put it in the mail and send it to them, right? Would you want to call somebody and read it to them over the phone? Because that's the energy and that's the heart to heart that people are going to connect with, and they're going to they're going to understand where that came from. And then once you have those two down, then you can stand by it, right? Then you can say, even if you unsubscribe, even if that didn't connect with you, that's okay, because it truly came from a place that I would have read this, and it came from my heart, and I really enjoy it. So it's for you, it's an offering for you, but it's not based in your reaction. And that's that sticky piece that, we want their interaction, we want their engagement, but at the same time, we have to create and go through our own process of giving offerings and giving information.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about, if you read through it and you find yourself skimming over a piece, then take that piece out. I think sometimes people think that, these longer blog posts are better, and that's not always true. So, and I think you're right. Sometimes it is just about getting started. If you don't put something out there, you're not going to be able to create better content, because you've got to start somewhere, right? And then you can start to go. So how do you know, what's working? Because for Facebook ads, right, when I'm running an ad campaign for people, it's pretty easy to tell, we had 500 people click on this and we had 10 people convert, so I'm able to say, okay, well, this is working, this isn't working. But, when you're just putting out content, sometimes it's not always easy to tell, right? I mean, you can look at open rates and you can see how many people are reading your blog posts, but how do you kind of measure and keep track of what's working and what's not?
That's a great question. And I think, in the public relations, in the marketing game, you can get caught up in how much money you spend and how much money you're earning. But to have actual metrics of how you want to measure success, you get to choose that. So I have a lot of clients who, for them, it's a successful campaign when people reply to the email, right? So in those emails, we're inherently massaging people to respond to what we're asking them, or we're saying straight up, send us your thoughts, or how did this touch you, or what do you think, or even very basic questions. One of my most successful emails was with a client, and it was to a group of parents, like 8,000 parents. And the question was simply, how are you feeling? Right now, how are you feeling? And we had, hundreds of email responses. And for her, she was like, this is perfect. I'm getting engagement. I'm getting feedback. We're connecting. And she really wanted to build that relationship. So open rates didn't mean anything, right? It was the response. It was, do people take the time to actually, on their cell phone, on their computer, send something in? So that was one specific client, and she knows very clearly, for her, she wants response from her people. There are other people who, I have a couple clients who really want to see click-through rates. So they want to look at how many people are clicking in the email. They don't just open it, but then they actually follow the link and they go somewhere else, because that page is really what they want to offer to people. So that's another thing you can look at. And then, sharing, forwarding, those are always options. Those they don't give you as much, because you can't always be asking for people to share your content. Ideally, you're creating content that people just automatically are like, hi, you've got to read this. But to expect that every time, right? Would we do that? Amy, would you ever forward every email from somebody to other people?
No, I don't think people would talk to me anymore if I did, but.
Right, then you have to be strategic, like, okay, well, this one's a really key piece, and I know that in 6 weeks I'm launching a program, so now I'm going to have a shareable option in this email, and then it's going to ramp up to this, offering, this program. So it's taking a more holistic view of what you're trying to do and what your goals are and who you want to be, right? Like, who are you? Do you really want people to just open all your emails and never respond? Do you really want people to always buy products? Like, what are you trying to do? And it's okay to let that dictate the content.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point. It's being clear on your goals, right? So what are your goals for that email, for that blog post? Is it leading into something else? Is it part of a campaign? And not everything, you're not going to hit every blog post and every email out of the park, right? So some things are going to be more popular than others. I know there are certain topics that I talk about that always seem to get more of a reaction than other things, right? But it's still important to, tie in those other pieces in with it. So I love that. I think it's true. It's being really clear on your goals and paying attention to the metrics that matter to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And almost like being a little lighthearted, right? Like, it's an experiment. At some point, it's an experiment, because like you said, you could really work on a fantastic piece of content, send it out, and it's like crickets. And then you could write one in the middle of the night that you had an idea, and you're like, well, let me just send this out, and it just gets shared and people are loving it. And that gives you information, but it's also like, there's a little lightness to it, right? It's take yourself seriously, and also you can breathe, like give yourself some space.
Yeah. I think that that's true, right? Just sometimes you just got to put it out there, and it's okay. Whatever happens is going to happen, right?
Yeah. And then just use that information, right?
Yeah, you're right. It's one big experiment. So let's talk about, since we're talking about conversions, and most people, when we've got a business, especially an online business, our main goal, we're selling some type of product or service. So whether it's a coaching service or it's an actual physical product, I think a lot of questions that people have, and I get this question a lot, when someone clicks on my Facebook ad and they get on my list, like, how long is it going to take to turn them into a customer?
Yeah.
And if they watch my webinar, how many webinars do they have to watch before they actually reach out and want to work with me? Is it like this? Is it immediate? Like, they're going to be like, yes, I want to work with you as soon as they get on your email list? Or, does it take a little bit of time? And how do you, follow that so that you are, you're on the right path?
Right. And it's amazing how that is a huge experiment as well, because you're just collecting data at that point. I mean, I'm sure you've worked with people, and I know that I have, where you'll put out a product and people who've never heard of you will buy it instantly, right? That's random and that's rare. And I think unless you're like Jeff Walker or Marie Forleo or Oprah or Ariana Huffington, that might be what you're doing. But for the rest of us normal humans who are rocking out in life, it's going to take a little bit of relationship building. And that's great, because what you want ideally is an engaged client, right? You want someone who already knows who you are and knows what you're doing, and then they want to work with you, because otherwise it's a lot of trust and a lot of faith, and sometimes a lot of miscommunication, right? I know that people have purchased Jeff Walker's products thinking it was going to be X, and it was radically different, right? But if you're on his list and you read his emails, you know exactly what it's going to be. So in terms of your question of how long does it take? I mean, I think with a lot of my clients, we're looking at least 3 to 6 months before making a large purchase, right? And 3 to 6 months is a pretty big range too. So 3 months for around a $55, $60 purchase online program, and then about at least 6 months for a larger program that's around $1,000. Again, this is specific to my clients and their audiences. Some people are gonna, if you know that your ideal client has millions of dollars and makes impulsive decisions, you're probably gonna have a shorter time frame. If your client is really methodical, they're gonna have a longer time frame. If your client is, like for you, Amy, I mean, some of your clients come to you, I'm sure, and they're like, we're launching in a week, we gotta do it now. Right? Like, they're gonna purchase much faster than someone who's coming for a online parenting program, we'll say, or wants to do mindfulness stress reduction. Those are going to take a little bit longer because you're building a relationship. You're legitimately solving a problem. And so that sometimes increases urgency and, increases sales.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's totally right. And that's something that, when I'm working with a client, and whether they're trying to sell a service or a product, it really does depend on, the industry, the niche, the price point. I mean, there are a lot of things that go into this. So yeah, I mean, I can speak to my own business. I will have people that get on my list and immediately they're like, I need help. Like, I've been trying to run Facebook ads and they're not working. And I know I just need help, right? Yeah. But that's pretty easy because that's a service that I provide. They've tried it, they're annoyed with it, they don't want to deal with it anymore. But then, yeah, but it's like, but then other people, you've got to build that relationship. They want to get to know you. And so just because someone gets on your list doesn't mean they're going to buy right away. They might be on your list for a while, and then they might buy, a year or two down the road. Maybe their business isn't in the place where they're ready to invest in that, or they just don't need your services just yet. But I think you're right. It's really just making sure that you're putting out that good content and building that relationship so that when they are ready, or when they do know that they need help, then you're the person that they go to, right?
Totally. And you never know who they're talking to. You never know who's running in their circles. That could be that next person who hops on your list and immediately purchases, right? Yeah. So it's seeing that bigger picture of, I'm not just sending an email, I'm building my work, I'm building my authority in the area, I'm showing all of my offerings. And even if somebody hires you to do, you know, Facebook ads for a short amount of time, if they're on your list, they're still gonna get all that amazing content, which is, I mean, that's such a gift to now have technology that we can consistently learn when we want to. Right? So being able to be that person, like you said, who, when I type in my email, Facebook, you come to the top because you're right there with all your great content. And that's incredible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, how do you make sure that your content's clear, that when I'm sending out an email to my list, that they really understand, you know, what I do, who I help, like how I serve them. So it doesn't get murky. There's no confusion there. It's just, okay, here she is. This is what she does. I know exactly how she can help me.
That is such a great question, because as we know, and I'm sure as all the people watching know, when you have an idea, it's so clear up here, and then the challenge is trying to share it with somebody else. I think there's like some, you know, famous quote about, once it's not about learning, it's about once you can teach something that you have learned, then you really master it. And so in the creation of the content, your goal is to always make it as simple as possible, right? Even if somebody was to scan your email, they know exactly what you were saying. They understand the heart of where you were going, and it's not murky. So that might take 2 or 3 passes. It might take reading it out loud really slowly. That's something that I do. It might take pretending. I like to imagine that I have an eraser and I just erase my brain of what the client is and that we've been working together for 3 years and yada, yada, yada. And I think, okay, if I just open this email, you know, what am I understanding? What do I have questions about, right? Because we get caught up in lingo, and lingo is fun and it includes us and we feel great. But if we don't clearly communicate with our audience, then they're not going to open our next email. They're not going to see that sense of trust. And a lot of times they can feel very isolated, right? And even, you know, even in some private Facebook groups that are sort of like mastermind groups, people would put posts up explaining their projects. And it's, even as someone who does this, I'm like, whoa, 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 what are you saying? I don't understand. So, you know, there are lots of different ways. I mean, I'd love to hear, Amy, if you've done any of these, but, you know, even thinking about it as if you were a 12-year-old, like, okay, how do I understand it? How do I comprehend it? And then do not be afraid to delete. Delete is totally okay. If something's getting murky and there's too many details, delete that line, keep it simple, keep it concise. Make the offer for what they're going to get out of it and not necessarily the components of it. So instead of taking 3 paragraphs to explain it's going to be a weekly webinar and 3 45-minute phone calls and 45 PDFs that have detailed information about, if that's getting murky, which it probably will, you're going to focus specifically on how they're going to feel after it's done, what the results are going to be, how it's going to change their life. And that, oof, like that's good, you know? Nobody cares about PDFs.
Exactly. No, I always say that you don't want to sell the features of your program or your service, right? Like how many PDFs and downloads everybody's going to get. It's more about, you know, how, like what they're going to get out of it, you know, after they go through your program or after they work with you, you know, like, are they going to be less overwhelmed, or are they going to, you know, be able to book more clients, or, you know, whatever it is. But I love what you said about, you know, don't be scared to delete something, because I'm really bad about that. Like I will type something out and I'll just sit there and stare at it. And I know it's bad and I know I just need to delete it, but it's like, I'll try to make it work. And I'm like banging my head on the desk, trying to make this like paragraph work, and it just needs to go, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think you're absolutely right about keeping it simple and don't use, you know, the lingo and stuff. You want to keep it really clear, really simple. And that's really true, especially in your ads, because if you're using terms that people aren't really familiar with, then they're just going to scroll past your ad. They have no idea what you're talking about. So I totally agree. Avoid, you know, that lingo and those terms that are specific to your industry, because even though you understand it, you know, there are people out there that might need your help, but they have no idea what you're talking about because you're not speaking in their language.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I loved, we did Facebook ads one time. We hired somebody because of course we were like, this is a whole different beast of an animal. And we really wanted someone who, like you, who's very expert at it and knows what to look for and how to craft it. But the challenge was just making it so fit into those, you know, certain number of characters, those boxes, and just really keeping it tight and still emotional, right? Still honest, still engaging. And that was such a fun challenge because it really allowed us to get super clear, you know? And then from that, I was like, oh, I can totally write emails because I got the chunk, you know? And it's almost like when you're at a party. So I have a lot of friends who are engineers, and we always joke that we live completely different lives because I do mission-driven, you know, content marketing, and they work on like nuclear weapons. Like, it's crazy how different our worlds are. And so a lot of times I'll think, okay, if I was at a party with them and I had to explain my client's product or my client's idea or my client's email, could they understand it? You know, like, and not to say engineers are not dumb, right? They're brilliant people, but we're in different worlds. So how can I use my knowledge of this to connect with them, still in a place that's going to engage them? So if you have people in your life like that, totally think of them as the model of like, okay, they're radically different than me, but we connect in other ways. So how can I still use language and text to connect with them?
And I think that's a good exercise, right? Is whenever you're writing, you know, copy, whether it's a sales page or ads, if you run it by someone else and just listen to what they say back to you, you know, like give it to them and say, okay, what does this say? Like, what does this make you think of, right? And listen to the words that they say, because I think that that can help you get a lot of clarity, because you think you're saying one thing, but what you think you're saying isn't coming across, right?
Totally, totally. And I love that you just said that, like, use their language. And if you have current clients who are already responding to you in emails or on Facebook or wherever it might be, use that language because it's a gift, right? They're helping you create that content. Q&As are huge. And then anytime somebody gives you a response with feedback, you can use that to really transform your offerings. So it was great, Amy. I love that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about, because I know this is a question that a lot of people have, and I get this question a lot. How often do you need to be creating content, blog posts, and emailing your content out to your list? So I know a lot of people, it's like we get excited to build our list, and then when we start to get people on our list, and it's like, oh crap, like what am I going to say to them now? And if I send this email, are they going to unsubscribe? You know, so there's all these things that I think people kind of get overwhelmed with when it comes to emailing out to their list. So what's too much and what's not enough?
Well, honestly, I think best practice is you should send an email every 6 hours.
Oh my God.
That was amazing. Your face. I was like, no, don't do that.
I was like, I definitely am not emailing out that much. It's time for that.
No, do not email out every 6 hours. That would be insane. And I think you go crazy trying to create content. Oh, sorry. So, you know, again, this goes back to who you are and your metrics, right? So I think that being able to create something and to create a routine that feels authentic to your brand and to what you're trying to offer, that's going to be the best. And ideally, I like to create stuff that gives you room to grow. So with a lot of my clients, we usually start out only sending emails twice a month, right?
Right.
And that'll be every other week. And then we have room to grow. And then if we're seeing a lot of good feedback, or we're seeing people really responding to the email specifically, or she's going to launch a product, or she's leading a new class, that gives us so much more space to play with, to fill in holes and not feel overwhelming, right?
Right.
And, you know, I know Marie Forleo, for example, when she was launching B School, she sent out an email, I think like on a Saturday, and her emails are normally every Tuesday if you get those. And her in that email on the Saturday, she even acknowledged, you know, it must be important if I'm not emailing you on Tuesday. And I was like, ooh, that is brilliant, because you're acknowledging your own routine, and you're acknowledging when you step outside of the routine, and you're saying, this is super important, pay attention, right? Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. With other clients that we have, it's once a week, and we're sending that out like every Wednesday. you know, if you have a lot of content, or if your content's really short, I would say you could do more than once a week. But for me, more than once a week is a lot. It's a lot, and it doesn't match up with any of my current clients, but it totally might match up with you. You know, just experiment with how that feels. I mean, daily notes from the universe, right? Like that's every.
I love my note from the universe. It like makes my day every day.
Yeah, you know, and that's a totally different strategy. That is, you know, its own sort of program in and of itself. So it's not necessarily like an email newsletter or an email. It's just it's on its own. But that's brilliant, and it works, and it's so nourishing for so many people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say no less than once a month. No more than twice a week. That's a nice little range.
No, I think you're right. I think it's about, you know, finding what works for your business. So if you know, create a lot of content, maybe you send out like short little tips a couple of times a week and that works for you, then that's great. But I think you're right. It's more about being consistent. So if you're going to email out every Tuesday, like Marie does, then you need to email out every Tuesday. You know, like I do this webinar every Tuesday. So everybody gets an email at like around 9 o'clock in the morning, and then they get one 10 minutes before it starts, and it's every week. So I think being consistent, because if you email out here, you know, like once, and then like 6 months down the road, you send another email out, like people completely forget that they're even on your list. They have no idea who you are. And then that's where you start to see people jumping off of your list, right? Because they have no idea who you are or how they got on your list, because it was so long ago.
Yeah, 100%. And if you can create a routine and a rhythm with your community and acknowledge that, I mean, that's so inclusive. It makes people feel like they're part of something. It makes them feel protected. It makes them feel secure. And when you can provide clarity for people, that's incredible. In a world where we have very little clarity about things, it's nice to have something that's always expected, always consistent. And even if they don't, you know, read it all the time, that's okay, because they know they're going to it, and they know it's not random, and they know that you're putting the energy and the effort forward to do it. And that's, again, that is communicating more and more of who you are and how you want to do this business, which is exciting.
I love that. I love everything that you just said. So we've got a couple more minutes. So I want to talk about subject lines. So, and if you guys have questions, you can go ahead and type them in real fast. But let's talk about subject lines, because this is something that I love. And I think, you know, it's important, right? Because if you email out, you spend all this time and effort creating this email, so you want to make sure that people actually open it, right? So what are some tips and tricks you've got around writing subject lines?
Yeah, so the first is to pay attention to your instinct when an email comes in. So for me, I have my phone, right? And if an email pops up, it'll show right here across the top. And there are times where I'll see a header, and it doesn't matter what I'm doing, I will open that email. For me, when I do that, I write down what the subject line was, because I want to dig in about what was there that made me pause and made me want to open it immediately, right? And that's not going to be, it's not necessarily language. It's there was something under that energy that attracted me, and how can I connect to that energy too in my emails and create that? Now, again, Amy, I love that you said not every blog post is going to be a huge hit. Not every email is going to be, you know, a masterful, everybody goes crazy over it. So
right.
The pressure off that every subject line's got to be perfect, right? You're going to have your readers who read every email regardless of your subject lines, and that's great. When you're launching something, you're obviously going to want to up your game on your subject lines so people are digging in. Jeff Walker did this one time where he forgot something, and so one of his emails, the subject line was "my bad." And I when I came in, I was like, Jeff Walker messed up? Like, I'm absolutely reading this, right? And he was promoting a program. But that was interesting, because for me, what that highlighted is people are interested in when other people screw up, right? Like there's an innate curiosity in us, like, oh, what's going on over there? Oh, I want to know. Ooh. And so not to always have "my bad" as your subject line, but if that's something that connects with you, or if you can play with it and you can be fun, right? You can tweak it, like, oops, or didn't expect that. That's super fun. You know, even there are some people who will write on their birthday and say, why am I sending you an email on my birthday? But they're doing it in part of a bigger picture and a bigger strategy. So I think, again, give yourself some space. It's just a subject line. And what would I open? Like, what about this email could I put as a subject that if I received it, I would be curious, I would open it. And then another component, which I'm sure, Amy, you think about all the time with Facebook ads, is where are the people in their day? Like, if you send the email at 3 p.m., are your clients' parents? Are they picking up their kids? Are they sitting in an office?
That's really good.
Like,
I really like that.
So trying to figure that out too, and think about, okay, it's 9 a.m. or it's 6 a.m., right? What's happening for them in that moment that this email could serve them?
That's such a good tip. That's one I've never thought about that. Like, if I'm sending this out in the afternoon, like, what are people doing at this time? Like, that's brilliant. I love it. And I love the idea of keeping, you know, a list of subject lines that you open. Like, I usually just drop them all in I have a swipe file, right? So that when I'm stuck and I can't come up with anything, I'll just scroll through and see if anything, you know, sparks an idea or, you know, something comes to mind, because you know, sometimes it's hard. I think it's hard to come up with subject lines. Like, I'll sit at my computer, I'll have the email and it's like ready to go. And then like 20 minutes later and I'm still like, what's the subject line going to be? Like, I have no idea.
Like, couldn't write a subject line, and people will be like, couldn't write a subject line, I'm going to read that. I mean, it's interesting. And then just knowing that, I think, again, taking the pressure off and knowing that this is part of a bigger puzzle for your business. It's like, okay, you know, it's that sense of, all right, it's the idea of like, what color are we going to make the icing for a birthday cake, right? Like, the birthday's still going to happen. The people will still come. Everybody will celebrate regardless of the color of the cake. Now, will some people be more excited to eat the cake because of the icing? Sure. But will there be cake? Yes. Like, we'll be okay.
I love that. Okay, so we're getting, it's 2:31, so we're late. We're getting tons of great feedback. Thank you guys, everyone that signed up. Everybody loves you. You're so freaking awesome and so darn cute. Lori, I love Lori. That's Lori that said that. And let's see, very good tips. Awesome. So I'm gonna pop up, if you guys want to get in touch with Corey, then you can just pop over to the right-hand side of your screen, click the Let's Chat button, and you can connect with her there. It's also going to be in the email that you guys will get with the replay link. So hopefully you got some really great tips. It went by so fast. I feel like 30 minutes is over in no time. But hopefully you got some really great tips on creating content and writing subject lines and all of that good stuff. If you still have questions, though, you can reach out to Corey. You can always drop me an email, hello@sociallabmarketing.com, and we'll be back next week. So thank you so much, Corey, for coming. It was so much fun.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. It was wonderful to be part of this.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will see you guys next week. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.